Welcome to the deep dive. So let's set aside the massive pyramids for a moment.
Yeah, let's do that.
Today, we're digging into something maybe a bit more unexpected. Ancient Egyptian funerary gardens.
Actual gardens, like with plants.
Exactly. Real green spaces right there in the Necropolis, the city of the dead.
Huh. That seems different.
It really does. So our mission today is basically to get a handle on what these were, why they mattered, and crucially, how a pretty recent discovery changed how we see them.
Okay, so we're talking tomb paintings, reliefs, that kind of thing.
That's part of it, the iconography. But the big piece is this archaeological find from 2017 by the Spanish Project Djehuti.
Right, that made some waves.
It did, because, for a civilization we link so much with deserts and stone tombs, the idea of tending actual gardens there is quite a surprise.
It really is. But then again, they live by the Nile, agriculture is everything, so maybe extending that care for nature into the afterlife. It makes a certain kind of sense.
Maybe it does. Okay, so first things first.
Yeah.
Let's be super clear. There are those little miniature models of gardens inside tombs.
Ah, right, like symbolic ones.
Exactly. We see those like back in Dynasty 11. Interesting, but not what we're focusing on today.
We're talking about actual gardens, outside the tomb entrance.
Yes. Physical structures.
Yeah.
And that's where the Project Djehuti find comes in. It gave us our best look at a real one.
Our most solid evidence, really.
So try to picture this. We're usually looking at the courtyard area in front of those rock-cut tombs, the hypogea.
Okay.
And there you might find these rectangular garden plots. The one Djehuti found was about 3 meters by 2 meters. Not huge, but definitely there.
And they weren't just flat patches of dirt, were they? I remember reading they were often raised.
Yeah, raised maybe half a meter or so and divided up.
Into a grid, right? Like little squares.
Exactly. The Djehuti one had a grid, maybe 30-centimeter squares, possibly with low adobe brick borders. Some central squares might have even been a bit higher. Very structured.
Very organized, which feels very Egyptian, imposing order.
And definitely involving plants. We know they found the remains of a tamarisk tree trunk and roots in the Djehuti garden.
And the tomb paintings show other trees, maybe even small pools or ponds, though I guess not in this specific find.
Not confirmed in Djehuti, no. But the paintings suggest it. And there was also a small adobe chapel attached to the tomb facade right near the garden.
So this whole setup, the raised structure, the grid, it feels deliberate, like creating an ordered sacred space.
That's the idea, right? Imposing math order on the chaos of the desert landscape, making an ideal safe zone for the deceased.
And the grid would make planting easier, maybe irrigation too. The elevation kind of marks it off as special sacred ground.
So when did this practice start? The Djehuti garden is Middle Kingdom, Dynasty the 12th, so roughly 2000 BC.
But the tomb paintings, iconography, that's often later, right? More New Kingdom.
Yeah, mostly New Kingdom, maybe 1550 BC onwards. So what does that mean?
Well, it could suggest the practice started physically in the Middle Kingdom, perhaps among the elite.
Which makes sense. The Djehuti tomb was large, likely for a top official. Thebes was becoming the capital then.
Right. And then maybe it got codified, represented more formally in art during the New Kingdom.
And the location, Dra Abu el-Naga in Luxor, ancient Thebes, that was a major sacred burial ground.
Definitely prime real estate for the afterlife.
Okay, so what were they for? Why have a garden there?
Primarily, it seems, as a place for offerings, to sustain the deceased in the afterlife.
And they found proof of that.
They did. In the Djehuti garden, they found a ceramic bowl with dates and other dried fruit inside, a direct offering.
Ah, okay. So the living would bring offerings there. Could the garden itself provide offerings, like flowers?
Quite possibly, yes. And that little chapel near the Djehuti garden. That was likely the focal point for the offering rituals.
And keeping it going would require work, right? Watering, tending.
Absolutely. It wasn't just symbolic, it needed maintenance. They found a layer of Limo-Nile silt in the Djehuti garden, which confirms it was irrigated. Someone had to be doing that.
So beyond the practical offerings, there's deeper symbolism here.
Oh, definitely. It's like a little piece of paradise, a green oasis, contrasting sharply with the surrounding desert.
A symbol of life in the place of death.
Exactly. And the central theme is resurrection, rebirth, tying into the whole Osiris myth cycle.
And the specific elements matter, too.
Very much so. If there was water, like a pond, that evoked none, the primordial waters of creation. Plants like lotus and papyrus symbolize creation, life, rebirth.
And the trees. You mentioned the tamarisk found at Djehuti.
Right. Trees were key. The date palm meant life and sustenance. The sycamore was linked to nurturing goddesses, like Nut offering food and water to the deceased. Persitries also tied to resurrection.
And the tamarisk.
It has strong funerary connections, often associated with Osiris. It was also seen as a resting place for the Ba, the aspect of the soul that could travel. Even things like lettuce, believe it or not, symbolized fertility and coming back to life.
Wow. So the garden wasn't just pretty. It was like an engine for resurrection.
Yeah.
Helping the deceased.
You could sort of see it that way. It sustained the Ka, the life force, through offerings, and its very structure and contents invoked these powerful regenerative symbols, a vital connection point.
Which brings us back to that 2017 Proyecto Djehuti Discovery. Just finding it was significant.
Hugely significant. They'd been working in Dra Abu el-Naga since 2002, mostly on New Kingdom tombs. Then they found this, right in front of a big Middle Kingdom tomb.
And the details they uncovered were amazing. The dimensions, the adobe grid, the raised squares.
The actual botanical remains, intact seeds, maybe cilantro, eggplant, onion, melon, and that tamarisk, plus the offering bowl. Real, tangible stuff.
And the proof of irrigation, the silt layer.
Yes. And then there was the small chapel next to it, with 3 stelae from slightly later, Dynasty XIII, around 1800 BC.
So people kept using the spot even after the original tomb owner.
It seems so. The stelae mention various individuals and gods like Osiris, Ptah, Sokar. It shows the site retained its sacred character for centuries.
So summing up the impact of this find, what's the big deal?
Well, first, it's archaeological proof. It confirms that these gardens, known mainly from art, were a real practice in Thebes. It moves from images to reality.
Okay, so it grounds the iconography.
Exactly. And it tells us more about the Middle Kingdom in Thebes, their specific funerary rituals, how they laid out these sacred spaces. We get direct evidence of the plants they chose, which raises questions about water management, too.
It reinforces these symbolic meanings we talked about.
Right. It strengthens our understanding of their beliefs about resurrection and the connection between the living and the dead. For Egyptology, it's a fantastic, well-contextualized case study. We can now directly compare the art with the archaeology.
So these funerary gardens really open a window onto how ancient Egyptians viewed the afterlife, the deep role of nature, that whole life-death connection.
A really intimate window, in a way.
And the Proyecto Djehuti find just brought it all into focus, confirming these practices weren't just artistic fancy.
Made it real.
So here's a final thought for you to ponder. Considering this dedication, this real effort to cultivate life right in the heart of the domain of death, what does that tell us about the ancient Egyptian concept of eternity? And maybe how does that resonate or contrast with our own modern ideas about remembrance and the afterlife?
That's a deep one to leave on.
Something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.